People's opinions of you are their problem, not yours. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. Much of human suffering stems not from who we are, but from our attempts to control how others perceive us. We step into life like actors on an invisible stage, constantly anxious beneath the gaze of the crowd. A single criticism can ruin our entire day. A single rejection can make us question our self-worth. And sometimes, just the feeling of being unacknowledged is enough to make us stray from our true selves. The opinions of others often reflect their inner world far more than they reflect who you truly are. Everyone views life through the lens of their own experiences, traumas, beliefs, and fears. Some judge you because they have been betrayed. Some belittle you because they feel insecure about themselves. Some cannot comprehend the path you walk simply because they lack the courage to step out of their comfort zone. Therefore, trying to please everyone is like standing before hundreds of distorted mirrors, desperately searching for your true face within them. You will lose your way very quickly. The greatest danger is not being misunderstood by others, but gradually losing yourself just to be accepted. There are those who live their entire lives like a draft, constantly edited by the opinions around them. They say what others want to hear, live by the standards others set, and chase dreams that do not truly belong to them. And then, one day, amidst an abundance of praise, they still feel entirely empty. Because the human soul cannot grow within the cage of people-pleasing. Spiritual freedom begins the moment you realize others have the right to think whatever they want about you, just as the sky has the right to brew a storm. You cannot go everywhere explaining yourself, nor can you control every story others invent about you. Attempting to do so will only exhaust your mind. A tree does not stop growing just because someone criticizes its crooked branches. An ocean does not stop making waves just because someone fears its depths. And a person should not abandon their true nature merely to exchange it for temporary approval. What one can learn is to detach their self-worth from the noise of public opinion. It is neither arrogance nor apathy, but the understanding that self-respect should never rest in the hands of others. When you live true to your conscience, treat yourself with kindness, and embrace life with sincerity, the judgments out there become nothing more than a passing breeze outside your window. They exist, but they no longer hold the power to dictate who you are. This life is not a courtroom where you must constantly defend your existence. It is a journey of learning to live authentically without asking for everyone's permission or validation. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. There are people who step into this life not bearing the beauty of perfection, but the beauty of cracks that once endured agonizing pain. They do not shine like polished statues in a luxurious palace, but rather like an old tree, battered and leaning from the storm, yet still deeply rooted in the earth. It is exactly these people who move us the most profoundly. Because the true beauty of a person lies not in never falling, but in how they rise after their soul has been crushed by life. Failure strips away the ego. Suffering is the fire that burns away naive illusions. Loss is the freezing rain that forces us to stare directly into the void within our hearts. And struggle is the silent battle fought every night, when no one sees the tears, the clenched teeth of endurance, or the moments of wanting to give it all up. Yet strangely, it is this very darkness that gives a person their depth. Someone who has never known pain often understands life only through reason. But one who has traversed the abyss understands it through the soul. The most beautiful people rarely speak too much of their wounds. They carry a very peculiar tenderness, the tenderness of someone who knows what it feels like to be shattered. They do not easily judge others, for they understand that everyone is silently fighting a battle of their own. Their eyes hold the serenity of someone who has cried until no tears remain. Their smiles hold the depth of someone who once thought they would never smile again. And their kindness is not mere social courtesy, but a compassion born from their own days of endurance. Life sometimes feels like being thrown into the freezing depths of the ocean. Some sink forever in despair, but some learn to swim in the dark. They surface not with arrogance, but with eyes that have realized life is a fragile miracle. Precisely because they once lost their way, they know how to become a guiding light for others. Precisely because they were once completely alone, they know how to embrace the pain of the person beside them without demanding an explanation. Sometimes, the most radiant souls are born from the darkest of days. Just as gold must pass through fire to become pure, human beings often must pass through brokenness to learn how to love, forgive, and be strong. Their scars do not make them ugly, they make them more real, more profound, and beautiful in a way that perfection could never touch. You were given life. It is your duty and also your entitlement as a human being to find something beautiful within life, no matter how slight. Elizabeth Gilbert. A resounding achievement, a perfect love, or a life without storms. But the deeper truth is, true beauty often resides in the little things that only an awakened soul can recognize. A ray of sunlight slipping through the window after days of despair. A timely embrace when the heart is exhausted. A morning where you still have the strength to walk on, even though inside you once wanted to collapse. These are not trivial things. They are proof that life is still silently holding us in its embrace. Being born is not just a biological privilege, it is also a spiritual responsibility. Life does not hand us a promise of eternal happiness, but it offers the ability to find meaning amidst the chaos. And sometimes, a person's greatest mission is not to conquer the world, but to keep their heart from withering away amidst the blows of existence. Because when a person stops seeing beauty, they begin to exist as a mere shadow alive, yet no longer feeling life itself. There are days when life feels like a dark, windowless room. Everything is heavy, meaningless, and freezing cold. But it is precisely in those moments that finding something beautiful, even as small as the sound of rain on the porch, the smell of morning coffee, or a sincere glance, becomes the most powerful act of rebellion against despair. That is how people save their own souls. Not through profound philosophies, but through the ability to still be moved by simple things. What keeps us alive is rarely something monumental. A tree grows from a rock crevice not because it is stronger than the storm, but because it always reaches toward the tiny sliver of light above. Humans are the same. We don't survive because life is easy, but because of our ability to find a reason to keep loving life, even if it's a very small one. And sometimes, a tiny fragment of beauty preserved every day holds a greater power of salvation than the most glorious victories. Seeking the beautiful is not weakness or mere daydreaming. It is the survival instinct of a mature soul. It is an affirmation that no matter how harsh the world gets, one still has the right to keep a patch of light for oneself. Because as long as we can still be moved by beauty, we have not yet lost ourselves. The things we are most ashamed of, the things we are most afraid to say, do not separate us from others. On the contrary, they connect us if we have the courage to speak them. Starhawk. People spend most of their lives hiding their dark corners. We learn to smile while breaking apart, learn to say I'm fine as a survival reflex, and carefully lock away the things that bring us the most shame. Everyone fears that if others see that vulnerable part, the failures, the insecurities, the deep loneliness, the thoughts we never dared to admit, they will be judged, alienated, or worse, deemed unworthy of love. Ironically, the very thing we try hardest to hide is often what makes us the most alike. Beneath all the social masks, human beings are not as different as they think. Everyone has felt that they are not good enough. Everyone carries a memory that tightens their chest whenever recalled. Everyone has had nights lying still in the dark, battling thoughts that no one else knows. The only difference is that some hide it deeper, while others learn to name it. And the moment a person is brave enough to speak the truth about their pain, something strange happens. Instead of being isolated, they make others feel seen. Prolonged silence creates the illusion that we alone are broken. But when a person is honest about their fears, their traumas, or their shameful moments, they inadvertently open a door for other souls to step out of their own darkness. A sincere confession sometimes holds more power than 1,000 empty words of advice. Because human beings do not connect deeply through perfection, they connect through their cracks. It is those very cracks that let the light in. What makes us most afraid of being rejected is often what makes others feel closest to us. A person who dares to say, "I was once in despair," "I once felt worthless," or "I was terrified too," does not become weaker, they become more real. And authenticity always possesses a stronger magnetism than any perfect facade. Because in a world where everyone tries to prove they are strong, the one who admits to having fallen gives others the permission to simply be human. Perhaps that is why deep conversations often heal us more than we realize. Not because every problem is solved, but because, for the first time, someone realizes they are not alone in their suffering. Shame thrives best in darkness and silence, but when called out with courage, it gradually loses its power. And from the very place that was once a wound, a genuine connection is born. Discovering the truth about ourselves is a lifetime's work, but it's worth the effort. Fred Rogers. We are not born with a complete ego engraved like a fixed map. We only begin with fragmented pieces, memories, emotions, family influences, society's praises and criticisms, and wounds we haven't yet named. Discovering the truth about oneself is not a sudden moment of enlightenment, but a lifelong journey where we are both the seeker and the uncharted territory. There is a common illusion that knowing who you are is a clear destination, as if we only need to look into the mirror of our soul once to see the entire true portrait. We change with time, with loss, with failures, and even with the moments of perceived success that leave a void inside. Every experience peels back a layer of illusion while simultaneously opening a new depth of awareness. And sometimes, what we thought was me yesterday is no longer entirely true for me today. This journey is not comfortable, because the truth about oneself is not always pretty. There are things we want to believe about ourselves, that we are strong, good, and stable, but reality is more complex. Sometimes we are weak, selfish, afraid, or contradict the very values we claim. Facing these parts is not for the sake of self-judgment, but to understand that human beings are fundamentally not a monolithic block. We are an ecosystem of inner conflicts, and it is this very conflict that creates our depth. The more we dare to look directly within, the lighter we become. Because the greatest exhaustion does not come from being imperfect, but from having to maintain a false image. When we begin to accept that we are in the process of learning to become ourselves, the pressure to be right from the start slowly fades away. And in that space, true life finally finds the room to breathe. Self-awareness is not meant for rigid self-control, but for better understanding the forces operating within us. Why do we react that way? Why do we fear that thing? What from the past is continuing to speak for us in the present? When these questions are asked with patience, a person begins to detach from unconscious reactions and inches closer to inner freedom. And no matter how long that journey takes, it is always worthwhile. For there is no knowledge more important than knowing oneself. The outside world may change, others may come and go, but the relationship we have with ourselves is the foundation of all life experiences. The more we know ourselves, the less we get swept up in external chaos, and the more we know how to live in alignment with our true nature rather than borrowed templates. Self-discovery is not about finding a fixed, perfect version, but learning to live honestly with our own constant evolution. And in that movement, one does not become less, but becomes deeper, more real, and more vividly alive each day. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Self-care is often misunderstood as a form of self-indulgence, a retreat from responsibility, or even sheer selfishness. But looking deeper into our psychological and social structures reveals the opposite. Self-care is not hiding from the world, but learning how to survive in it without being crushed. It is not weakness, but a sophisticated form of discipline, the discipline of remaining intact amidst the relentless push and pull of existence. Every person lives within an invisible system of pressure: family expectations, societal standards, the grueling pace of work, and the constant comparisons of the digital age. In that context, the act of stopping to get enough sleep, to eat well, to rest when exhausted, or simply to say no to things that cause harm is no longer a purely personal behavior. It becomes an act of resistance against a culture that constantly demands more, faster, more efficient, regardless of the mental toll it extracts. Self-care is the reclamation of sovereignty over one's own body and emotions. When a person is swept into a rhythm that only caters to external demands, they gradually lose their sense of inner boundaries. They begin to exist more as a tool than a living being. And in that state, a person is easily exploited not just physically, but spiritually. Stopping to listen to the body, acknowledging one's limits, and saying no when necessary, these are the ways we reclaim ownership of ourselves. A society is only truly healthy when the individuals within it are not driven to exhaustion just to survive. And an individual is only truly free when they do not have to sacrifice their health, peace, or dignity to appease invisible, oppressive systems. In that sense, every act of self-care, no matter how small, like resting at the right time or rejecting an unreasonable demand, is a declaration: I exist not merely to serve, but to live. It is crucial to distinguish between self-indulgence and self-preservation. Indulgence often stems from escapism, avoiding reality, or procrastinating responsibilities. But true self-care requires profound awareness, knowing when to stop to recover, knowing when to persevere, and knowing which boundaries cannot be crossed without destroying oneself. It is not about abandoning the battle, but learning not to deplete yourself entirely on the battlefield. We do not need to reach the point of burnout to earn the right to rest. We do not need to become dysfunctional to be allowed to stop, and we do not need to be severely damaged to deserve care. This is a vital reversal of many antiquated value systems, where a person's worth is often measured by their level of sacrifice. Self-care is not a shrunken form of selfishness. It is the foundation of the ability to live sustainably and consciously. When a person knows how to protect themselves, they not only save their own life, but also help model a different way of living, one where people aren't pushed to the edge just for validation. And in that sense, self-care truly becomes an act that is both deeply personal and profoundly rebellious. You are the sky. Everything else is just the weather. Pema Chödrön. We often live as though we are a storm swept away by countless external phenomena. Praise makes us beam, criticism makes us crumble, success makes us soar, failure makes us drown. But hidden beneath all those fluctuations lies something deeper, an unchanging foundation that few ever touch, the pure presence of our own being. When viewed from that perspective, you are not the weather. You are the sky. The weather is always changing. It can be the radiant sunshine of joy, the gray clouds of anxiety, the tempest of loss, or the sudden downpour of resurrected memories. These states come and go, without permission, without warning. But the sky is different. It is not erased by the storm, nor does it vanish when dark clouds gather. It is simply the vast space where every phenomenon can appear and dissolve. Identifying with the weather is the very root of suffering. When we think, I am this sadness, I am this failure, or I am this anger, we unknowingly reduce ourselves to a temporary state. And from then on, we become trapped in the feeling that we are always changing, always unstable, always lacking. But when there is a step back in awareness, a gentle detachment from the experience, we begin to see, sadness is arising within me, but I am not that sadness. This distinction is incredibly subtle yet liberating. A rage may flare up fiercely, but it is still just a phenomenon passing through the space of consciousness. A fear may tighten the chest, but it is merely a temporary ripple in the stream of the mind. All of these things require a space to exist. That space is you, vaster than any emotion, quieter than any thought. Looking at life this way does not mean denying emotions or becoming detached. On the contrary, it allows a person to feel more deeply without being devoured. The sky does not fight the storm, nor does it try to hold on to the sunlight forever. It simply allows everything to happen. It is this very vastness that creates inner strength, a form of stability unbound by circumstances. When someone truly understands that they are the sky, they begin to live differently. They no longer panic whenever emotions shift, nor do they shatter when life fluctuates. They still feel everything fully, but they no longer equate their being with whatever is happening. And within that stillness, a profound kind of freedom emerges. The freedom of not needing to control everything to be at peace. The weather may be fierce, but it is never the entire truth about you. That truth is vaster, deeper, and quieter, just like the sky that is always there, even when you forget to look up. We are not machines. We are not on this earth to serve the desires of an abusive system through our own exhaustion. Human beings were not born to be spare parts in a giant machine. We are not cogs whose only value lies in spinning faster, enduring longer, and complaining less than the others. We are living beings with our own breathing rhythms, with limits, with emotions, with days when we simply cannot function normally, and that is exactly what makes us human. But the modern world often forgets this truth. It operates as if exhaustion were a valid currency, as if a person's worth could be measured by the hours they trade, the pressure they endure, or the number of times they override their own bodies. In that logic, resting is seen as weakness, and stopping is seen as failure. And gradually, people internalize the belief that they only have the right to exist if they are perpetually drained. This is where the distortion takes root. When the system no longer serves humanity, but instead forces humanity into a state of serving the system with our health, our sleep, and our peace of mind. A weary body is branded as dedication. An exhausted spirit is praised as hard work, and an imbalanced life is normalized as the obvious price of success. But deep beneath that rhetoric lies a simpler and far more painful truth. We are slowly drifting away from our own natural boundaries. Exhaustion is not a badge of strength, but a symptom of profound disconnection from our innate needs. When a person repeatedly ignores their body's signals, dismissing fatigue, swallowing stress, postponing recovery, they do not grow stronger, they grow further estranged from themselves. And in that state, a human is easily turned into an instrument, working beyond endurance, bearing more pressure than is healthy, and slowly losing the sense that they deserve rest even when they haven't met the quota. Affirming that we are not machines is not merely an opinion, but a resetting of our inner boundaries. It reminds us that the body is not an infinite resource, that the mind is not an ever-ready tool for extraction, and that the value of a life cannot be defined solely by its productivity. A person has the right to stop, not out of retreat, but to maintain their own wholeness. The choice lies between living as a self-determined subject and living as an object manipulated by external expectation. When a person begins to listen to their body, respect their limits, and refuse systems that steadily erode them, they are not just practicing self-care, they are reclaiming their humanity. A life should not only be measured by what we produce, but by how we manage to preserve our true selves in the process of living. And if there is one fundamental truth, it is this: no achievement is worth sacrificing the integrity of a human being. What is the thing that never dies? It is the loyal force born within us, a power greater than ourselves, calling new seeds to the barren, devastated, and empty places so that we may be replanted. This very force, in its steadfastness, in its loyalty to us, in its love for us, in its often mysterious ways, is greater, more majestic, and more ancient than any power ever known before. Clarissa Pinkola Estés. There are things in human life so fragile that a single tragedy is enough to make them crumble. Ambition can vanish after a failure. Pride can be crushed by loss, and illusions of control often disappear the moment the storms of life arrive. But deeper than all those fragile things, there exists a strange power, silent, resilient, almost primal, a power that seemingly never dies. It is not the power of dominance, authority, or victory. It is the power of the fierce loyalty between life and the human spirit itself. There is something within us that always wants to keep going, even when everything has run completely dry. Some deep, hidden part stubbornly holds on to the light, even when our conscious minds believe we are in absolute despair. People have stood amidst spiritual ruins countless times, thinking they could never be resurrected again. But then, time passes, and a new seed quietly sprouts in the soil that was once scorched by agony. That is the most profound mystery of existence. Life always finds a way to return. There is a layer deeper than the personal ego where the instinct toward rebirth resides. Just like nature after a forest fire, the ground that seemed completely dead becomes the very place where the first green shoots push through most fiercely. Human life is the same. After seemingly unbearable losses, something still quietly pulls us back toward life. A chance encounter, a tiny flicker of hope, a fragile reason to wake up tomorrow. And often, we ourselves cannot even fathom how we still manage to stand back up. Perhaps because true strength lies not in never falling, but in the ability to be called back from the most desolate wastelands of the soul. That power is not loud. It does not scream like ambition or boast like authority. It is like an ancient underground river flowing through human history, patient, profound, and immortal. It exists in the instinct of a mother shielding her child amidst a war, in a heart that still retains the capacity to love after being betrayed, in someone who continues to live kindly despite being wounded by life time and time again. The most sacred truth is that this power seems more loyal to us than we are to ourselves. There are times when we give up on ourselves, yet life has not given up on us. There are moments when the mind sinks into total darkness, yet some profound part of us quietly guards the last remaining spark. And it is exactly this that makes human beings so miraculous. We carry within us an energy older than fear, greater than despair, and more enduring than any ruin. Perhaps it is the closest thing to what many call the soul, not merely a religious concept, but a primal life force that constantly seeks to reconnect us with meaning, with love, and with rebirth. It does not appear through clear logic. It arrives through mysterious pathways. But every time a person recovers from a breakdown, every time a withered heart remembers how to beat anew, we see the traces of that very power. And perhaps the thing that never dies within a human being is not the ego, fame, or achievement. What is truly immortal is the soul's capacity for rebirth, the silent force that always finds a way to replant life into soil we thought could never bloom again. In their own way, anyone can break. It is okay to keep your heart outside of your body for days, months, and years. Nayyirah Waheed. People often think that breaking must be a monumental event, a violent loss, a visible collapse that anyone looking can immediately recognize. But in reality, the deepest shatterings mostly happen in silence. Someone breaks from a parting. Someone breaks from living in isolation for far too long. Someone breaks simply because they had to be strong for too many consecutive years without a single permission to be weak. Every soul has its breaking point, and in their own way, anyone can be fractured by life. The most painful part is that many people continue to live very normally while inside they crumbled long ago. They still go to work, still laugh and talk, still reply to messages on time, and still fulfill their daily duties. But it is all like a tree that still stands tall, even though its very core has hollowed out. Society usually only acknowledges visible wounds, so people learn to hide their invisible agonies. And the longer they hide it, the more they feel they must carry their pain alone as a private obligation. Perhaps that is why many live as though they are keeping their heart outside their body. They surrender their emotions to memories, to someone who has left, to the things that have never been healed. Their heart no longer rests safely within their chest. It hangs suspended somewhere between the past and the present, and when living like that for too long, a person becomes incredibly fragile. Just a small word can hurt them. Just a moment of silence is enough to make them anxious. Because when the heart is outside the body, every collision with life strikes directly at their softest, most vulnerable part. Breaking does not make a person less valuable. A cracked vase does not lose its ability to hold things. Sometimes it becomes even more precious because of the story it carries. Deeply wounded souls often learn to feel others more keenly. They understand the loneliness in someone's eyes. They hear the sorrow hidden behind an "I'm fine," and it is exactly that fragility that sometimes becomes the wellspring of the profoundest compassion. People are not truly strong because they don't feel pain, but because they continue to live alongside it. There are those who have carried their hearts outside their bodies for years, easily hurt, easily triggered, easily shattered, yet they still love, still hope, and still keep walking forward. That is not weakness. That is a very quiet form of courage. And perhaps healing is not about forcing yourself to go back to normal, because after profound trauma, no one is ever exactly as they were before. Healing is learning to gently place your heart back where it belongs, no longer exposed to the world like an open wound, yet not locked away in fear. It is learning how to live without constantly defending yourself against every emotion. The most beautiful thing about human beings is not that they have never broken, but that even after living with a bare heart in this brutal, colliding world, they have not lost their capacity to love and be moved. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful form of living.